Hey, I haven't seen you in a while. So hopefully you guys had a really good, uh, I was going to say commercial break. Hopefully you guys had a really good holiday season, had a really good Thanksgiving, Christmas, Hanukkah, insert holiday here. In today's video, we are going to be diving back into HTMX, and we're going to be taking a look at using HTMX without the need for a backend. Some of you might be making very simple tools like I do all the time for very specific things. And there's so many open source APIs that half the time the data is already out there. So doing client-side templates makes it so that you don't even have to write a backend. Today's video, we're just going to jump right into it. We're going to be making a weather dashboard with HTMX and AJAX. It's a thing. And we're going to be doing it completely client-side. This behind me that you can see up there, it's one HTML file. Okay, first things first, how does any of this even work? Like, how is it even possible? So as you know, HTMX has an insane amount of built-in functionality already, but for the cases where there might be something extra that's missing, there are also these things called extensions. And I'm not going to go through them too much in this video. We're going to be focusing on one specific target, which is client-side templates. But if you're interested, you can take a look. There's a list, and it kind of gives you an idea of all the other things that you can do. There are only two that I would say are going to be super useful in most things, and one of them is this JSON encodings extension, and then the other one is the one we're going to be using today, which is client-side templates. So if we click on over to client-side templates, we can get an idea for what exactly is going on here. So this essentially lets you take in JSON instead of HTML, and then we can pass it into templates. If you're familiar with things like Jinja on the Python side, or in this case, we're going to be using AJAX, which is a JavaScript library that very closely mimics Jinja. A lot of the syntax is going to be very similar, and a lot of the sort of methodology, some of the ways that you actually interact with the things are going to be very similar. So if we take a look at this, we can see that there's a few different templating libraries that you can use. I'm going to be using AJAX just because that's what I have the most experience with, but Mustache is another one, Handlebars, and I've never accessed extra large, whatever. You can get a feel for how exactly you use them if you read the documentation. Okay, so now we know that we're going to be using extensions to enable these client-side templates. And one quick thing before we dive into it is that any of the extensions are essentially just going to be these JavaScript files that you can import, and you can download them, or you can go ahead and, view them. Okay, so let's start out our HTML file with something very basic here, and I'm going to go ahead and use the live server extension down here to make sure that we have this hot reloading thing going on. So if we do thing, we should get that there to try. So it should just reload. I'm going to go ahead and change the title, weather dashboard. Okay, so first we'll import Tailwind, the dev version, and then we're going to go ahead and add Font Awesome because we're going to be using that for the icons. I have client-side templates in here and AJAX, and of course we can't forget HTMX. So those are the only imports we're going to be using here. If we want HTMX to print out all the logs, we can add this to the head, and it'll just make sure that we get everything in the console. I'm going to remove it now just because I know more or less what's going to happen. But if you're ever stuck doing anything that's specifically like this client-side, and obviously you don't get a printout from your backend, you can enable that and just see exactly what's going on. So for our background, we're going to be using those images that are coming from Unsplash, and there's an interesting way to do it where with Tailwind, you can go ahead and just pass in the URL as a regular, JavaScript thing. And Unsplash has this interesting thing where if you use this source.unsplash.com / the resolution you're looking for, and then a query of whatever it is you're looking for, we can get a random image. So if I reset this a few times, you'll see that each and every time we get a new image. And that's going to be really useful because every time we go to this weather dashboard, then we can go ahead and have a new interesting thing to see. So if we use it as like a wallpaper, if we use it as like a, it's just going to be a placeholder on the screen somewhere in your house, then you get a nice little image. And then we're also going to make sure that it doesn't repeat. And we're going to add some stuff that's Tailwind specific in order to make sure that it's covering and it's also not repeating and it's doing all that stuff. So we can go ahead and add a few more little things for, you know, the div. So I'll add a div where our towels will live, and then I'm going to go ahead and just paste in some classes. We don't have to go over these. There's nothing special here. It's just stuff. We'll go ahead and add an HX get, and for now, I'll just make it an empty string for HX indicator, hashtag loading indicator. And inside of the container, I'm going to go ahead and add this. So loading indicator. And I'll just type in loading. Oh, loading. And that way we get a little loading thing each time. We can also give it a little bit of styling just so we have something there. And I do this kind of indentation and spacing just to make sure that it's easy for you to read, but you know, you don't need to use this kind of spacing if you don't want to. It just makes it easier to kind of go down the list. This is kind of ridiculous, but whatever. It's fine. Okay, in order to make sure that all of our HTMX requests are getting pulled into templates, we have to make sure that we add the attribute HX-Ext, so HX extension, and specify which one or which ones we're going to be using. And these trickle down into all the children, which is the same for most of the HX parameters. So if you want stuff like that, you just add it to the top. The other one we're going to be adding is for the actual request itself. We're going to set the headers to basically not have any, because when we are using this, it's in a production environment, you'd probably want to add your own headers, but HTMX is going to be sending its own headers like HX request and, you know, HX trigger, those kind of things. If it's your own API, then it's probably going to be fine. You could just add those into your cores and, you know, all your stuff, and it'll work fine. But if you're doing it with an external third-party API like we're going to be doing today, then it might give you cores issues, or it's going to give you just issues where it's going to, you know, swat down your request. So, and for the actual HX request, we're also going to do HX trigger. And for now, we're just going to say load, but eventually we will also have it to auto update. So, well, that is trippy. Why is that zooming in? Okay, so we're gonna. Okay, so I disabled the onload for a second just because I noticed that it was freaking out because it's not actually getting anything. So it was just, I guess, adding some, I don't know what it was doing. It was just adding some random stuff to the body, and it was just going forever. So what data are we actually going to be pulling? That's probably what you're wondering. So let's take a look at that next. And I found this thing called Open Meteo. I'm guessing it's Open Meteorology, and it's just a free weather API that gives you just whatever you want, basically. It seems like it's really good. It is free if it's for personal use. If it's commercial use, then you need to pay, but it's, you know, it's pretty straightforward. It's actually not that expensive. It seems pretty well priced. Since it's for personal use, we are golden. You don't need an API key. You don't need anything. And that's why I'm using this specifically, just so we don't have to deal with adding keys or anything like that. We just ping this and it's just gonna work. So if we go to the API docs, we can see that you can actually pick your location. So I'm in Seattle, so we're just doing that. And it'll give you the latitude and longitude. You could choose the things that you want. For the sake of this demo, I didn't actually use any of these other more advanced things where this is more of a time series data, so you actually get it split out with the time frame. We're going to be using the ones that are just current down here. So I selected these, and a few of these we're actually not going to be using, but I selected them on purpose just so we could see how that works with the template. I am in Fahrenheit land, but you could switch it to whatever you want, to whatever units you want. And, you know, same for everything else. You can do timestamp or, you know, just regular formatted date. Once you've picked, you know, you've set up your location, you pick the things that you want, you can go down to the bottom, and this is kind of useless because it just has stuff. But what you want is this link right here. And this is going to have all your parameters and everything all in there. Obviously, you could do this programmatically if you wanted to, but for the sake of this demo, we're just going to copy that and paste it in here. I'm just going to paste it in from my other file. So, okay, so we have that going, and that should get us data. But what does that actually mean? Not much. So HX trigger equals load. So this is what happens when you get JSON data without using a template. You just get this gibberish because HTMX is expecting HTML. So if you don't add anything, that's HTML. It's just going to swap in when it's what it gets, and that is JSON data. So in order to fix that, we're going to go ahead and start creating our nunJAX template. There are two attributes actually that you can use to add the template to your HTMX request. There's the nunJAX array template, or if you're using Mustache, like it doesn't matter. This works for all of them. Whatever your templating engine is, and then the type of data you're getting. So in this case, we have an array because it's just coming back as a dictionary, as a just JSON thing. It's not actually split out. And then we have nunJAX template. So if you're getting something more structured, you could use that. For most cases, you're probably going to want to use array. So nunJAX array template. And that just makes sure that when we add our, so if I do script, and this is going to be, we're going to give it the same ID, which is nunJAX template. Type text template. And essentially what's happening is we could use the same kind of Jinja or other, similar templating placeholders, where in this case, it's going to be data. And we can see that it's just spitting out that object. If I do data dot, I think current, it's going to be dot current dot temperature 2M. Yeah, so that's the current temperature. So you can see this is pretty much how it works for everything. So we are getting JSON data, we are cherry picking the data that we want, and we are spitting that out to the screen. If I do current, I think it's unit, current units. Yeah, so current units, and we get the actual unit. So if we're going to do both, then we could do copy this and paste this in here. And we could say, so our current temperature and then the unit. So this means that if it was coming back differently, if it was coming back Celsius, then it would just change to Celsius. We could take a look at the actual response that we're getting, and you can get a feel for all the other data that's coming in. So I can go to network, and then I can reload the page, and I'm just going to do copy value, copy response, and I'm going to just add that here to the top of our script just so we can get a feel for what exactly it is that we're pulling in. And this is stupid. All right, so we have this. That might be a little too big. But you can see we have some basic information for latitude and longitude. We have, I guess, how long it took to actually get this data. We have some stuff. None of this we're actually going to use. If you were going to be doing this and customizing it, the OpenMedia API does have a geocoding API endpoint. So essentially you could put in your city, and then it would give you back some potential results with the latitude and longitude. And then you probably have a very simple JavaScript thing that would just spit that out to this HTMX request. That is a little bit more complicated than it needs to be for the sake of the demo we're doing. So I'm just going to leave it at that. Most of this stuff we're not going to be using. So I'm just going to get rid of it from here just so we can see what's actually happening. So we have the data split out into current, and we have the unit split out into something differently. And just a footnote, just something to know, the OpenMedia API does this for all of the other metrics. So if you do hourly data, then it's going to be hourly and then hourly units. If you do weekly forecasts or whatever it is, the other stuff that they have there, then it's going to be the same thing. You're always going to have the units, and then you're going to have this. So this might be something that you want to map or zip together. But for us, it's going to be fine. So essentially we have, this is what it's essentially happening. So we have data. That's, I guess if it's JavaScript, it's const data. Something like that is more or less what's going to be happening. I'm going to comment that out just so it's not actually doing anything. But you can see that we have temperature underscore 2M. I can't remember what the 2M, I don't know if that's 2 meters or whatever. But the idea is we have the key, and then we have the value for each, but the key is going to be the same. So that's useful for us because now we can just iterate over that. So I'm going to show you how do we make a loop. It functions pretty much the same as Jinja. So if you're coming from a Python background, so for key and value in data dot current, and then we can end that also in the same way. So N4, and then inside here, this is going to be our code block. So we could say data current and then key, and then current units, and it's going to be the same thing. I guess dot key would work too. So if we do dot key, oh crap. No, that wouldn't work because we already have the value here. So we could do, we just want the value, and then we're going to be using that key. Oh, I see where my mistake. So that is actually correct, but we want the actual key. We could do this, and then we can get fancy about it and wrap it in a paragraph tag. And then now we can see that things are starting to pull in together over here on the right. So we have the key again. We're iterating over just current, but then we're using these keys that we're getting back to pull out the value from the current units. So we have our key, which is time, interval, temperature, all that stuff, the actual value for that key, and then we're going to be using that key to just pull that out of the other thing. So this is where it gets interesting. This is essentially what the template is. If I add a class here, we can go ahead and say, text -2XL, and then now all of the font's going to be bigger. And we could do border -2, and now they all have a border. We could do padding -4, and now they all have a little padding, rounded -2XL. So that's essentially what's going on for just getting the data, looping over it. And can I minimize this? I'm going to cut this out of here and just paste it over here in something we're not using, just so we can see it a little bit clearer. So this is the template. Any HTML goes, and then Nunjux itself has filters and all kinds of things that you can use. If we go to the Nunjux website, we could see that it has all of these filters, and some of these you might be used to, again, if you're used to Jinja or other templating languages. So you could split and slice and do string formatting and title and all that stuff. And that's what we're going to be doing next. So we can see that some of these have underscores, and they have other values, underscore 10M and 2M. So we can actually clean that up by piping that into one of the filters. So replace, and then we could tell it what we're going to replace, which is underscores, and what we're going to replace it with, which is a space. And then now that stuff is going to be split out, and we can actually go ahead and do it again. So into another replace. So we can get rid of 2M and make that also be, in this case, empty, right? And then we can do it actually one more time. This is why string formatting, if you're a web scraper, it's just, you're probably used to it, but it's not fun. So we got rid of the 10M. So if we look at the keys over here, we can see that we got rid of the underscores, we got rid of 2M, we got rid of 10M, so 10 meters, or I'm assuming that's 10 meters, and that is essentially the key. I'm going to go ahead and just move this stuff into its own p tag. So we have that p tag there, and then we can add another one for the value. And we can add another one. I'm going to change this up in a little bit, but I just want you to see more or less how things actually get going. We can have values, and they can all be their own, elements and all that stuff. So some of this is a little bit similar to how you might do it in React or JSX or something like that, or Jinja if you're used to that. The other thing we want to do for the title is the other filter for title case. And then that'll give us title cases. So even if the word is split, we'll get capital letters on each. You could also do, capitalize. Is it upper? Yeah, so you could do upper if you're trying to do that, lower, all that stuff. So we're just going to leave it to title case, just so we get that movie theater feeling. No, we're not going to be doing that. So what we will do, though, is give it some styling. And so for the icons, there was one thing I actually did that's a little bit out of the ordinary. First, what I want to do is, before we add the icons or any of that extra stuff, I'm going to go ahead and filter out some of these options, because we noticed that there are a few in there that weren't in my original demo. So time, we don't need, we're not going to be doing anything with. Though technically we could just do actually, you know what? I will do time. I didn't use time before. But for time, what I'm going to do is actually, so I didn't do this in my original demo, but we could do this. So if key is equal to time, then what we're going to do is I'm going to duplicate this and then percent else. And then we have one more at the end, and if. And what we're going to do is, if it's equal to title, we know we don't need these extra ones. Time, if it's equal to time, we don't need those extra ones. And we actually don't even need this one. Oops, I actually did that in the wrong place. Okay, so I'm going to erase that. So it's actually for the value. So if the key equals time, then what we're going to do to the value is filter it, replace t with a space percent. Else we just want the value. I don't know why I did that so many times. Just pretend it is a feature, not a bug. So we'll do that, and then we'll get rid of these extra ones that we added to here. Okay, so now we see that we have, it's still formatted in military time, but you can see that we have the date and we have the time. Now we don't have seconds added to there. So if I set it to auto refresh, so every 1s, it'll reload every second, but we're not actually getting the seconds. So that's kind of silly. If I set it to every 60 seconds, actually I'm going to set it to 61 seconds. Then we should actually see as it's running that if you have it actually, like once it's finished, you would actually see the time updating. For the sake of what we're doing today, it's going to be refreshing so often that you're going to notice it anyway. But what I don't want is the intervals, and I don't want the weather code. So what I'm going to do is let's filter those out in a different way, just so we can see some of the other things we can do. We could set a variable, and we can call it bad items. And we can set that equal to a list. I guess for Python, it's a list. For JavaScript, whatever, call it whatever you want. But we're gonna have this little container of stuff, and it's just gonna be the keys that we don't want. So interval and weather code. So now that variable, it's essentially the same as if we said, let bad items equal or whatever. So what we can do here is say that, I guess we could do it in here. So if key in bad items, actually, you know what? If key not in bad items, and then we'll go ahead and push that stuff up. I'll duplicate this, copy it over, and if. And then now we have time, and I can demo it here. Actually, if we add time, if I can spell time, and then we forgot an apostrophe. So now we got rid of time as well. Since I said I was going to leave time in, we'll just do this. Cool. Gonna go ahead and add all of these items into an element, and I'm just gonna copy and paste this stuff in because it's pretty basic. Oh, I see what's going on. Okay, so this was my mistake. So I have this here because what I was doing is the actual unit just goes at the end of this anyway. So we can paste that there. I guess technically we don't need that to be. I'm not entirely sure what went wrong, but I'm going to continue to copy over some classes. So for the container that actually has those items, I have these classes. Okay. For the actual title, I'm going to go ahead and give it this stuff. For the thingy with the value, we have this stuff. And I don't know why it's not getting the data current units key. Okay. I was stupid. I just put it in the wrong place at the wrong time. I guess it worked that time. I'm not entirely sure what happened there, but okay, so we're getting the value and we're parsing this stuff. Okay, now for the icon, this is pretty straightforward. I just went to Font Awesome and, just found a bunch of stuff and kind of pasted it in. But obviously, we don't want to have to do it individually. It makes sense that we have it added programmatically in our template, so let's do that. And I'm going to go ahead and copy this in because it's the same thing as setting this list, this array, this thing up here, except this time we're doing a dictionary or in JavaScript an object. And we're just, using the same keys. So I essentially just copied the keys that are coming from the request and gave it an icon. So just the CSS descriptor for that icon based on, what's in the font awesome. And then a random color, nothing specific. I just kind of gave it a color. Realistically, you could do JavaScript to give it a random hex value or something like that, but why would you do that? And since now we have that in that object, I can go ahead and just add that in here at the top, just under here. So we could see that since it's just templating, we could just add it, if you're used to using React or something like that, then this should be kind of familiar. We're just going to be using, just pulling that in. So the actual icon class, we were going to be adding that. And then for text, this is actually a Tailwind class, right? So it's normally text dash or color and then the value. But we're just going to be replacing the actual color with, that placeholder thing, that variable. And with that done, if I close this and go over to our thing, we have, stuff. We don't have one for time just because it wasn't in there originally. So I'm actually going to get rid of that now, time. And then when it reloads, we don't actually have that in there. I think that was all the styles pretty much. So you could see that each one of these is a template, super simplistic. We have an icon, we have some stuff, but I mean, think about it. Any cards that you do for objects that are e-commerce, it's basically item, and then you have price and description or title or whatever. So, essentially if this was going to be a sales kind of thing, then we would have, under the name, we might have something like another P tag for like, this is a blue toy shoe with Apple Music installed. And it would essentially be something like this, where you have something like that, specs, size XL or whatever. I don't know. It's not going to do it obviously in order, but the idea is that, if you're doing some kind of open source, using it with some kind of open source library for, I don't know, getting stuff, getting prices, or if you're doing a quick scraper, maybe there's a little bit of, client-side JavaScript going on here somewhere and you just want to pass it to a template instead of doing string formatting. Again, Nunjux has an insane number of, come on, you can do it. Has an insane number of just filters and auto escaping, and I think most of these are pretty useful. You have stuff like length, so if you have a certain number of items coming back, but realistically, the some of the useful ones are maybe group by if you're trying to do filtering that way, or if you're trying to do list, if you're trying to do URLs. So if you want a URL, you want to make sure that it's HTML safe so they can actually click on it and it's not just text, and there's something for that. So there's a lot of different things you can do, and it's very full featured and it's very user friendly. You can actually do scripts in here as well. So if even inside of our script, so this is the bottom. Let me see if I can collapse this. No, I cannot. So this is the bottom of our script right here. So right before it closes, I can actually add another script inside the script, because you got scripts inside your scripts, boy or girl or person or etc. You could do, like let var, I don't know, whatever, let var equals bacon. And that would be valid JavaScript, and that would still run. So if we scroll over back to our thing, like this is still going to be reloading, HTMX dot find dot Nunjux template. All this stuff is like, it's not going to break anything. Obviously, it's not going to do anything either, because I'm not actually telling it to do much. But the idea is you could add a script here. So if you had, I don't know, charting or stuff, like you could do stuff in here too. So this is essentially it for just a quick intro to how you use templates. Any HTML, you can just pop in there, and then you're just going to use this kind of syntax to replace the variables. Again, if in this case we're using an open source API, I feel like that's where it's pretty useful, especially if you're just trying to do something very quick. Like you can pop this up on a monitor or something like that, and maybe minus the this thing. So you could have this up on a monitor. You could have, so if you have your office and it needs something that's super quick, you don't want to write a backend for it or even host it. Like this is something that you could literally add to the simplest like Heroku thing without needing a backend or anything like that. It's just going to serve this HTML. So it's really useful. And this is also how you would use it if you want a separation of concerns between your API and your front end, but you were still trying to do the HTMX thing. Now, there is one potential downside to this, and that's if you look at your source code, the template is going to be, oh, not there. The template is going to be part of the HTML, so I don't know how much of that you actually care for. Normally, it's not an issue. It is just a templating thing. It's not like you're, like that card thing is going to be there somewhere. So that, and then the headers thing that we talked about before, where we have to set it to none in this case for the sake of making sure that this open source API, which we have no control over, doesn't spit it, give us a 404 or something like that, or 402 or whatever the thing is. Anyway, that was it. I'm going to stop recording now because if not, I'm never going to finish this. So yeah, Happy New Year again. Hopefully you're having a very good start to the new year. Thank you for watching the whole video. Hopefully this was helpful. Be sure to like and subscribe and comment if you have any, recommendations. Okay, listen, I gotta go. Okay, I gotta go. So I'm just gonna leave you that, and hopefully it was useful. And if it wasn't, then be sure to leave a comment below to tell me why it wasn't useful for you. So you don't have to go anywhere. But I'm gone. I will see you guys in the next video.